Welcome to Buckner's webinar, NCAA Infractions Committee's Review, Most Important Decisions from 2015. My name is Michael Buckner, and I am an attorney and serve as president of Buckner, and will serve as the presenter for today's program. Before we begin, let's review some housekeeping items. First, this program is being recorded. You can view the video of this webinar, as well as other Buckner online workshops on our website, bucknersportslaw.com, or on our YouTube channel. Second, this program has received approval for continuing legal education credits in several jurisdictions. During the program, I will read off 2 CLE attendance verification codes. For attorneys seeking CLE credit for this program, please document the codes and record them on an attendance verification worksheet, which will be provided in an email you will receive later today. For jurisdictions requiring Buckner to confirm an attorney's attendance in the program, please complete the worksheet and send it to us for our record keeping. Third, you received via email earlier today several documents, including a PowerPoint presentation and a workshop handout. You will receive a link to these materials again in an email that will be sent to you immediately after the program. That email also will contain links to an evaluation form, which I encourage you to complete so we can continue to improve our webinar offerings, and a request for a referral page, in which you can elect to provide us contact information for persons who you feel would benefit from our services. Email me at mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com if you did not receive the materials, or later today if you don't receive the second email. Fourth, your phones will be muted during the webinar. Fifth, we will have a question and answer session during 3 portions of the webinar. The first session will occur approximately 20 minutes into the program. The second chance will occur at approximately 40 minutes into the webinar. And a final opportunity will be conducted at the end of the webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, email it to mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com. I will answer as many questions as time permits. Finally, if you cannot see the PowerPoint slides through the Meeting Burner webinar system, exit the system, and when you log back into Meeting Burner, be sure to download the screen sharing app indicated in the screen. Now, with all those housekeeping items covered, let's begin our program. Today's program, again, is to review some of the most important decisions and issues and topics covered by the Committees on Infractions of the NCAA in 2015. Specifically, we'll review some of the key legal, administrative, and compliance takeaways from the cases that we're going to cover. We're going to go over any evidentiary and procedural decisions that were contemplated or discussed or addressed by either the Committee on Infractions or the Infraction Appeals Committee. And through these conversations and review of the cases, we'll talk about some strategies and best practices that college and athletic administrators can consider to implement on your campuses to make sure that some of the violations that occurred in the cases that we're going to cover do not occur on your campus. Now, there were approximately 19 cases that occurred last year through all 3 divisions. So we're going to try to highlight some of those most important issues. We can't highlight every single nuance, every detail. That will take a couple days. But the purpose of this webinar is just to give you an overview of really what went on last year. The sources of information that we're going to rely upon, again, are the NCAA Public Infractions Reports, which are stored on the NCAA Legislative Services Database, LSDBI. And on your screen, you should have the website address for LSDBI. Again, you can go in, and it has all the major infractions cases for both the Committees on Infractions and the Infraction Appeals Committees. We're also going to rely upon our experience conducting internal investigations and audits at NCAA member institutions, our research concerning investigative techniques, as well as our ongoing information sharing with members of the enforcement staff. Now let's begin our program with an overview of 2015. Overall, there were 19 infractions cases that were processed by the Committees on Infractions in Divisions 1, 2, and 3, and the Infraction Appeals Committee in Division 1. Again, today's program highlights just some of the samples of the rulings and decisions, and so we're not going to go into great detail over every single decision, but just give an overview of what transpired last year. What we found is that there was a significant use of the summary disposition process. And what is summary disposition? Is that it's a process in which you don't have to go to an actual hearing before the Committee on Infractions. It is where all parties, the institution, the enforcement staff, and if there are involved parties or involved individuals that have been alleged to have committed a major rules violation, all parties agree to the violations and jointly prepare a summary disposition report that is issued to the Committee on Infractions. And then the committee takes it up at its next scheduled meeting and reviews it and processes it without a hearing. So we found that in 2015, the rate of SDR usage by the member institutions has actually increased or maintained in the last few years. So more and more institutions are trying to resolve their infractions cases using that process instead of taking a chance and going to a hearing before the Committee on Infractions. Some of the advantages is that you can, again, try to agree with all the violations, self-impose significant penalties, present that to the committee, which will be less costs and also sometimes shorter process than going to a hearing. So we're seeing that occurring at all the levels. For purposes of our workshop, on your screen you should have an abbreviation key, and we'll be using instead of using a lot of the long form of the proper names of the various committees and other types of document names. We'll be using abbreviations for that throughout the program and on the screen. In terms of Division 1, there were 13 infraction cases that occurred last year. And what to note for Division 1, this is really the first full year where the transition from old Bylaw 19 and Bylaw 32 into the new Bylaw 19 was actually in full force. And for those of you who are not familiar with new Bylaw 19, the Division 1 membership changed the enforcement process. And some of the elements started taking effect in 2013. 2014 was really the initial full transition year, but 2015 was really the first full year that the vast majority of all the elements of the new Bylaw 19 was actually implemented and followed, including the full use of hearing panels. Under new Bylaw 19 in Division 1, the Committee on Infractions was expanded to up to 24 members, and each case was handled or heard by a hearing panel, which could consist of between 5 to 7 members. And so 2015 saw the full use of hearing panels as well as the full use of internal operating procedures for the Committee on Infractions and the enforcement staff. Now the COI and the enforcement staff did have operating procedures before, but in 2015 those were heavily revised, circulated among the member institutions and practitioners so that these operating procedures supplemented in great detail Bylaw 19. And this was actually a good thing because it provided specific guidelines for everyone to follow during the process. The COI hearing panels during 2015, they seemed to really emphasize aggravating and mitigating factors, which was a new feature to Bylaw 19. And so as we'll talk about later on in the program, the enforcement staff is obligated in its notice of allegations and in its various submissions, as well as the parties, to list out aggravating and mitigating factors in each case. And so we'll talk about some of the decisions from 2015 where the hearing panels actually talked about the impact of aggravating and mitigating factors on not only the findings of fact, but also how they actually came about the determination of penalties in these cases. There were a few cases in which the hearing panels actually rejected allegations submitted by the enforcement staff. And in a rare situation, well, it's not rare now, but in the past, when allegations were rejected by the Committee on Infractions, very rarely would the committee actually comment on that. But in 2015, the hearing panels actually created sections in the infractions reports where if they felt that an allegation was unwarranted and rejected that allegation, that they actually created sections to discuss in great detail why they rejected the enforcement staff's allegations. And then in a lot of cases, found that the hearing panels determined that the new penalty structure under new bylaw 19 was more lenient than the old one. And there was some type of concern that the new penalty matrix under bylaw 19 was going to create much more stringent penalties. But the hearing panels believed that the new penalty structure in some cases actually created more lenient penalties. So we'll continue to monitor that in 2016 to see where that continues in general. And then in 2015 for Division I, there were 2 appeals. One for a head men's basketball coach in Syracuse, and also one institution. Again, that was the Syracuse case as well. In Divisions 2 and 3, there weren't as many enforcement cases in those divisions, but in Division 2 there was 4 infractions cases and no appeals. And in Division 3, there were 2 infraction cases and no appeals. Generally speaking, in Divisions 2 and 3, there are far less infractions cases than in Division 1, and very rarely are there actual appeals in those 2 divisions. But again, just like in Divisions 1, Divisions 2 and 3, some of those cases contain very important guidance, not only for their respective divisions, but some of the findings and determinations by the Divisions 2 and 3 Committees on Infractions could be applied to Division 1. Okay, we're going to start our first question and answer session. If you have any questions, please email them to me at mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com. mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com. Okay, I'm checking the queue, and there are no questions at this point. So again, if you guys have any questions during the remainder of the program, please email them to mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com, and I will address them during our second question and answer session. Let's proceed with the program. Our second section of our program, we're going to cover some legal, administrative, and compliance implications from infractions decisions from 2015. So let's first start off with operations staff. And this really pertains to directors of football operations or basketball operations, non-coaching staff that is assigned to a particular team. In this case, this is the University of Hawaii case from December 2015. And in this case, the director of basketball operations performed various coaching duties. And again, that is prohibited by Bylaw 17 in Division I. In Division I, in Bylaw 1174, men's basketball is limited to 4 coaches. And because this director of ops actually performed coaching duties, he violated Bylaw 11.7.11111. And because of that, that was a violation. So for compliance officials on this call, please make sure that, one, you're educating your director of operations concerning Bylaw 11, and also making sure that when you're doing on-campus and on-court monitoring of practices or other athletic-related activities, that you're making sure that the director of ops is not performing any type of coaching duties. And we have, in some of our recent investigations, received similar allegations in other sports that have director of operations. And in those types of situations, we're getting a lot of these allegations from student athletes who are disgruntled. So, coaches should be aware that if they're going to be doing possibly listed activities, that the student athletes are recording or observing, and they could possibly be the origins of some of these allegations. Division 3 financial aid, and For those in Division III, of course, we know that in D3 financial aid legislation, member institutions are not permitted to provide athletics aid, only institutional-based aid that has no athletic criterion. So in this particular case, and this is from Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology and Emory and Henry College, 2 decisions from Division III in 2015. In both of these situations, the schools use various different type of institutional programs to award or calculate financial aid awards. Well, in both those schools, their program, although unintentioned, they did not intend to violate the Division III financial aid legislation. They use athletic criteria in order to issue scholarships or financial aid for student athletes. In particular, in the Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology case, they were so concerned about not violating financial aid legislation that they did not involve athletics in any aspect in calculating financial aid awards for student athletes. Well, because athletics had no involvement at all, no consultation at all, there was actually a blind spot, and the financial aid authorities did not consult with athletics or compliance specifically to make sure that their financial aid protocol actually was consistent and compliant with Division III financial aid legislation. So the lesson for Division III, and really for any NCAA member institution, is that making sure that the units and offices outside of athletics that have athletic-related duties, when they're developing policies, procedures, and protocols, making sure that they look to compliance, athletics compliance, as a resource, as consultants, to make sure that whatever policy, procedures, or protocols that they're developing are consistent with their division-specific legislation. Part 2 of Division III financial aid, again, comes from the Emory and Henry College case. And in that case, there were some representatives of athletics interest for the institution, including a member of the board of trustees, that contacted the financial aid office on various student athletes or prospective student athletes. And because of those phone calls into the financial aid office, the school adjusted the student athletes' aid packages, and of course, which was inconsistent with NCAA Bylaw 13 in Division III. Also, again, in Division III, the Emory and Henry College case, there were financial aid awards to student athletes that were used from funds contributed by institutional donors, and that violated NCAA Bylaw 15014. Again, as I mentioned on the first slide, making sure that there is active involvement, communication, education from athletics compliance to other non-athletic units, financial aid, admissions, housing, the registrar, any unit that has interface with athletics or student athletes or have athletic-related duties. Let's look at financial aid and housing and using incorrect methodology in order to compute those awards or those type of benefits to student athletes. In the Indiana University Purdue University Fort Wayne case from 2015, this is a Division I case. The institution used incorrect methodology to calculate financial aid for student athletes, and instead of using they use equivalency computations, which you're supposed to use for team awards, and instead of using the actual costs that those student athletes were actually incurred. And because of that, some student athletes actually received overawards. They actually received refunds because, for example, the institution was using equivalency computations for financial aid awards, so they're based upon the average number of credit hours taken by a typical student. And if a student athlete was taking less than the average number of credit hours, they were going to receive a refund from their financial aid. And of course, that becomes a violation under NCAA Bylaw 15532. Similarly, the university used the averaging method when they were looking at and calculating housing costs. So again, if a student athlete lived on campus in a dorm or apartment that had a less annual cost than the average cost that they were using in their financial aid calculations or housing calculations, then the student would have received a refund for that, which again is a violation of NCAA legislation. So again, it's going to be a recurring theme as we'll see throughout some of these cases, is that a lot of these violations occur because there was either lack or little coordination between athletics compliance and the campus offices and units, and little monitoring of the process and little review of the actual particular procedural protocols used. Let's look at Division I financial aid at this point. Again, this goes back to the Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne case. And in that case, the university did fail to follow several NCAA financial aid bylaws, including failing to provide a statement indicating the amount, duration, conditions, and terms of the award. And this is all supposed to be in writing. They didn't provide any type of hearings or notices that a student athlete could actually participate in a hearing when their financial aid was being decreased or canceled or reduced. And so you want to make sure that in terms of athletic compliance or institutional legal counsel, that you want to make sure that you review your financial aid policies and procedures, and making sure that every single year that if the aid is reduced, canceled, or non-renewed, that there is a written notice provided to student athletes, and in that written notice that the financial aid procedures and appeals procedures are placed in those notifications, and that you're making sure that there is proper fair process provided to student athletes that are appealing that decision. Next, let's look to training table meals. Again, this is from the IUPUI Fort Wayne case. I'm sorry, Indiana University, Purdue University Fort Wayne case. And this was a unique situation. It's one of the fairly rarely used bylaws. But under bylaw 1652C, institutions can provide a training table meal to a student athlete or student athletes, but they're limited to 1 meal per day. And in this case, the university did not have on-campus dining facilities for the student body. So they want to make sure that the student athletes receive proper nourishment. So they contracted with off-campus vendor to provide a training table meals for student athletes. But the school did not have in place any type of monitoring or restrictions to prevent student athletes from receiving more than 1 meal per day. And so the violation occurred regards to this. This also occurs to not just with training tables, but also during preseason workouts for football, women's volleyball, and other sports that show up prior to the fall semester starting. In terms of providing meals to student athletes that have not been enrolled in school or not certified to actually participate in athletic-related activities. And so that happens occasionally, not just with training table meals, but in other meals provided throughout the year. Next, let's look to the resources to support a Division I program. And in this case, again, the Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne case, the institution was transferring from a FCS school, football championship subdivision school, to a FBS school, football bowl subdivision school. And so the Committee on Infractions noted that there were lack of resources devoted to from the institution as a transition to the higher level of FBS. So they want to make sure in the report that they again emphasize as a warning to other schools that are transitioning between divisions, so between the subdivisions in Division 1 or between divisions to making sure that as they go up to a higher level, there's going to be more restrictions or more regulations and more requirements, and making sure that the institution implements the necessary resources to ensure that there is full compliance with the new subdivision or divisional legislative requirements. And the Florida A&M University case deals with, in part, medical examinations. And in this case, FAMU's athletic training staff believe that the physicals from student athletes remain valid for 1 year. And they didn't realize that the bylaw talked about in terms of that student athletes' medical examinations are valid within 6 months prior to a countable athletic-related activity. So although they may have had an exam in the first year, if they didn't actually engage in countable athletic-related activity within 6 months of taking that exam, they had to take a new physician-conducted medical examination. And that did not occur for approximately 18 student athletes in this case. For those of you who are like to talk about or think about or read about human relations and interpersonal relationship type situations in a athletics department, this is a case for you. Again, we're going back to the University of Hawaii case. And in that case, the head coach and the compliance officer had a very strained relationship where they literally did not communicate to each other. And the compliance officer communicated by other means, including email. And the compliance officer did not even attend practice for over 2 years. So there was very little monitoring going on from compliance to men's basketball. Well, because of that, there were violations that resulted from that. And so the head coach, instead of going to compliance, the head coach went to the athletic director. In particular, this situation, because of that, a violation that occurred could have been properly investigated, and any type of long-range impact of the violation could have been prevented if compliance knew about it. Also, because of the failure of compliance to really engage with men's basketball, the monitoring opportunities were severely limited. And so there could have been other opportunities for the violation to have been identified or prevented if there was a little bit more communication and monitoring between compliance and men's basketball. So the lesson from this is that you're going to have situations because of personalities, because of the job duties, because of the pressure, that you're going to have disagreements. You have strained relationships between compliance and the coaching staff, or compliance and other units on campus. And from the campus administrative level, from the AD, from the president, from the general counsel, from HR, making sure that those relations are properly managed. If there are any issues, making sure that they are addressed immediately pursuant to university's protocols. Because as you can see in this case, the issue between the coach and the compliance was not just an HR issue or a personnel issue, but became an NCAA issue because that interpersonal relationship, because of that impact negatively, it impacted negatively compliance and, of course, contributed to violations. Substance abuse policies has been a big issue last year in 2015 in 2 cases. In the California State University Sacramento case, as well as in the Oklahoma State University case. In both those cases, there were student athletes who tested positive for banned substances, and they were permitted to continue to participate in, which was inconsistent with the university's established athletic substance abuse policies. And we'll see in Oklahoma State there was a specific reason for that, and the committee goes into great detail about that, and we'll talk about that later on. But for purposes of this issue, making sure that, one, the institution has a substance abuse policy. and that if you have one, that you follow it, that the coaches, student athletes, administrators are properly educated on that, and that that policy is consistent with the NCAA's drug testing policy. Eligibility certification is always a big issue at all three levels. And as we know, schools are required to certify the eligibility of their student athletes. And they're supposed to do that every single semester. And in this particular case, Eastern New Mexico University case, the school had numerous eligibility certification errors for various reasons. And let's highlight some of them. And this occurs, and we find this occurs at schools in which have not devoted sufficient resources to compliance and to the registrar's office to help or deal with not only eligibility certification, but other compliance issues. But in this case, there were only two people regularly involved in eligibility certification, the compliance coordinator and the registrar. And the committee found that both of those individuals did not have sufficient time to devote to eligibility certification because of their other job duties and responsibilities. There were the committee found no appropriate compliance and monitoring procedures involved or implemented or followed. Even the athletic director at the hearing admitted that the compliance coordinator's other duties other than eligibility certification, overshadowed the coordinator's compliance responsibilities. That's not something that you really want to hear during a hearing. And the committee also found that there were no secondary reviews or spot checking occurred. So there was no spot checking by the faculty athletic rep. There was no spot checking by the athletic director. The head coach signed off on eligibility certification sheets, but again, the head coach wasn't directly involved. So what we're finding, what we advise schools to do is to make eligibility certification a team approach and involve the head coach in that process, involve academics in the process, so you have more people involved, more information data shared, so that you can try to identify errors or possible issues at the front end, and have the AD and the faculty athletic rep do spot checks. It could be, looking at one aspect of the eligibility certification worksheet, or doing spot checking an eligibility certification decision that was made, so that if you go to hearing and the committee does ask the athletic director or the faculty athletic rep, what does your signature on this eligibility certification worksheet mean? And if the AD or the FAR say, well, we just sign it. We just kind of quickly review it and we sign it, but other people actually do the actual work. Well, the committee and the hearing panels do not like that because it's not shared responsibility. There's no other secondary review or spot check outside the persons that are actually doing it on a day-to-day basis. So implementing some type of way in which the school can have some other party other than the person actually doing the day-to-day eligibility certification, having some type of check and monitoring is definitely needed. And again, let's talk about education for eligibility certification. We have two cases, Morehouse College and Eastern New Mexico University, in which the registrars in those cases did not receive any rules education, and they were primarily involved in the eligibility certification process. So making sure that not only you have spot checks and monitoring, but you have formal rules education for anyone outside of athletics that is involved in eligibility certification. And that includes sending them to the NCAA Regional Rules Seminar and having campus education. Also for registrars, I believe, of course, there was several years ago, and I believe it's still continuing, that the regional and national associations involving registrars or registrar functions actually have NCAA-specific panels or seminars or workshops. So those are available, and the institutions are already paying the registrar or people from the registrar's office to attend those conventions. It just makes perfect sense to make sure and mandate that they also attend those NCAA-specific sessions while they're there. Implementation of audit recommendations is becoming a newer issue I know it was a result from Arkansas Pine Bluff case from a few years ago, but here we have Eastern New Mexico University's case also have that as well. In this case, there were 2 compliance audits. One occurred in 2007 and another one in 2012, in which but in both those situations, the auditors noted that there were some weaknesses and deficiencies and shortcomings in the eligibility certification process. And they provided recommendations to address those deficiencies. However, the university elected, for whatever reason, not to implement those recommendations, not to fully address all the different changes or suggestions made by the auditors. And because of that, because they failed to implement the recommendations, the eligibility certification violations occurred. And so the committee noted that, and that was a main contributor to the violations. So make sure, and not just for eligibility certification, but make sure at all levels, not just athletics, if you have an audit done, whether it be an internal audit or external audit, making sure that the auditor's recommendations are implemented, and designating someone who will be responsible to make sure that the recommendations are implemented so that you can avoid the Eastern New Mexico University situation. Again, this is just not applicable to athletics audits. It can occur to any type of audit at your institution. Compliance software is becoming a big issue as more and more compliance departments are relying upon a lot of the great software packages that are available. So let's highlight 2 of these. In Morehouse College, they use a software program to help them calculate eligibility certification. And however, the software erroneously allowed remedial courses to be calculated toward progress toward degree. And as we all know, those of us who are in compliance or have compliance knowledge, remedial courses, generally speaking, cannot be used toward PTD requirements. And so making sure that, and we've advised some of our clients when we do compliance audits, using software is great. We use software programs in our day-to-day use. However, the software program is only as good as the designer or the person using it, or it's only as good as what information you put into the program. So making sure that whatever software program that you use, whether it be athletics or any other application in university, that you make sure that you fully understand all aspects of the program, all features of the program, and what is going to be inputted into the program, and what is going to be the end result, what's going to be the work product coming out, and making sure that whatever is inputted is accurate so that the input is also accurate as well. That also dovetails into the recruiting aspect. In West Virginia University, they use a compliance software package to monitor telephone and text message activity. Well, the university didn't realize that in this software program, until it was updated, the software program identified and stored potential text and telephone violations in a portion of the software program that wasn't monitored on a daily basis or regular basis. And the university only found out about that, where everything was being stored, all the potential violations being stored, until the software vendor updated the software program. So again, going back to what I said about compliance software, it is great to use compliance software because it helps streamline compliance processes, allows you to have more coverage for less amount of people, and making sure that the compliance monitoring process is done, and it's done on an automated basis. But with that type of flexibility and technology also comes with other responsibilities as well, to making sure that the software program is designed specifically for your institution and that you understand all the features and how it works. Actions of a coach imputed to institution. And this happens, on numerous cases where you have what's called a rogue employee or coach that actually does a lot of things or commits violations inconsistent with what the institution's rules are, what their education has been provided to them by the institution, and does things on their own. And a lot of schools try to argue to the committee that they should not be punished for the actions of their employees, especially when those actions are inconsistent with what their training has been and what the institutional policy is. Well, in the East Central University case, a Division II case, the Division II Committee on Infractions indicated that institutions act to their employees, and their employees' actions, even if they're inconsistent with institutional compliance expectations, are imputed to that college or university. So although you can get a mitigating factor that you have a rogue coach, the fact remains that if an employee commits a violation, it also becomes imputed to the institution. Let's look at housing. In the Arkansas Tech University case, there was a situation where student athletes were being reserved rooms for on-campus apartments. And the housing office committed a violation because they didn't do the same thing for other types of groups of students. And so it became an extra benefit under Division II legislation. Open gyms. All universities have open gyms in various different types of sports. And so we have in this situation with Southeastern Louisiana University case where various members of the coaching staff actually conducted various different types of open gym sessions. And the coaches were trying to say that these weren't actual countable athletic related activities, but they actually arranged, attended, monitored, and instructed student athletes at these sessions. So instead of being open gyms, which means that they weren't supposed to be there, they weren't supposed to organize, they weren't supposed to be recording attendance, they weren't supposed to be observing, they become countable athletic-related activities. And so because of that, not only did it impact out-of-season workouts or legislation, but also when they were in session or were in session, it could have impacted the in-season daily and weekly limitations. And then finally with this section, head coach control. Under bylaw, Division I bylaw 11.1111 and Divisions 2 and 3 bylaw 11.121, a head coach is required to do two things. One, promote an atmosphere of compliance within his or her program that extends to coaches and student athletes and others who report directly or indirectly to him or her, and to monitor their program's compliance with NCAA legislation. Now, a coach is presumed to have violated this bylaw, but they can rebut that presumption. So in the Southeastern Louisiana University case, that was concerning, part of it was concerning when does that occur. And so in this particular situation, the head coach couldn't rebut that because in part he was allegedly responsible or involved in not making sure that prospects that arrived on campus early did not violate NCAA legislation regarding housing. And he stated at the hearing that he had too many things on his plate and he didn't have time to check the prospects' living arrangements. And so the committee looked at that and said that his failure to, no matter how much stuff he had on his plate, his failure to make sure that the prospects that came on campus early comply with NCAA legislation in all aspects, basically created an atmosphere where rules compliance wasn't followed. And because of that, he failed his duties and responsibilities to control his program. So he violated bylaw 11.111. So at this point, I'm going to stop and do our second question and answer session. Again, if you have any questions for me, please email them to mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com. That's mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com. Again, I'm looking at the queue. There's no questions. Again, if you have any questions during our final question and answer session, please email them to mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com. For attorneys seeking CLE credit for this program, the attendance verification code is NZ478. That's A as in apple, N as in Nancy, Z as in zebra, 478. So make sure that you document that attendance verification code and put it on your CLE attendance verification worksheet, which will be sent to you after this program. Let's go on to our final section. Let's talk about the procedural and evidentiary decisions of the infractions committees. In this section, we're going to talk about any particular aspect of the infractions case, whether it be from the COI or from the appeals committee, that deals with a procedural issue or an issue of evidence during an infractions hearing. So let's talk about amending the notice of allegations. So after the notice of allegations issued by the enforcement staff, fact-finding and investigation is still ongoing by all the parties. And sometimes the enforcement staff would like to amend the allegation, the notice of allegations. Well, under Internal Operating Procedure 312.3, if the proposed change by the enforcement staff to the notice of allegation is material to the allegation, then the chair of the committee or the chair of the hearing panel will authorize the amendment. But under Internal Operating Procedure 312.3, then the parties get a full 90 days or whatever time span that the committee or the hearing panel authorizes to respond to that amendment. So, that, of course, clarification was made because, of course, if there is a significant amendment that is material to the allegations, it's not fair to the parties that they don't get extra time to fully vet that allegation and to do their due diligence to make sure that they provide a comprehensive response to that amendment. Let's look at levels of violation, Division 1. As part of the new Bylaw 19, there are no longer major and secondary violations, which are what it's like in Divisions 2 and 3. In Divisions 1 now, there are 4 levels of violations, the most significant being Level 1, and it goes all the way down to Level 4. Essentially what Division 1 did was they divided up major and secondary into 4. So major is now Levels 1 and 2, and secondary is now Levels 3 and 4. So there are now cases in 2015 where the committee is starting, the hearing panels are starting to clarify, okay, what is actually a Level 2 case, what's a Level 3 case, what's a Level 1 case. So we're going to have some examples here. In the West Virginia University case, they had impermissible text messages and telephone calls. And in the first instance, 4 programs engaged in 311 impermissible communications. And the committee the hearing panel looked at that and said that that was a Level 2 violation. Conversely, there were 10 programs, placed 35 impermissible communications, and they considered that to be a Level 3 or a high-level secondary case. So as we continue going on with more and more years, we're going to start seeing the hearing panels further clarify in different types of violations, at different types of settings, what are, for each of those particular bylaws, what's a Level 1, Level 2, Level 3 case. In the University of Hawaii case, there's a situation again with the director of basketball ops performing coaching duties. And so the committee indicated that every instance that the ops person performed a coaching duty at a practice or a workout, that one instance was a Level 3 violation. But because it occurred over a series of time, then each of those Level 3 violations combined together became a Level 2 case. So that's what's in the Bylaw 19, but now the hearing panels are actually implementing Bylaw 19 with real facts and real life cases. And so this is one of the first times that the hearing panels actually articulated that a cumulative effect of Level 3 cases can rise up to and upgrade the case to a Level 2 violation. In East Central University case, a Division 2 case, the university was asking for a penalty reduction in probation and fines, and they said that there were all these factors that were in place, and so the committee indicated that yes, in this case, they're going to reduce the probation or reduce the fines. And they noted several different factors, including citing some previous Division II cases. And that's if the institution can show that there's no finding of either a failure to monitor or lack of institutional control, that the violations were all committed by individuals no longer at the institution, that the school fully cooperated and acted promptly to address the violations, and there was excessive length of time that it took to resolve the case, and that the institution's response to the violations were appropriate. In all these situations, all those factors occurred, so the institution received a reduction in the probation and fines that the committee would normally have imposed in that case. Similarly, vacation of wins speculation. In the Wichita State University case, the university wanted to have their vacation of wins to not have occurred, or to change the penalty, vacation of wins penalty, substantially. And the committee said no. And they said vacation of wins due to participation of ineligible student athletes is warranted, even if the violations were unintentional and did not involve violation of lack of institutional control, ethical conduct, or academic issues. And so Wichita State was trying to argue, well, we didn't have any of those issues in our case, so therefore vacation of wins is not appropriate. And the committee said, well, that bylaw for vacation of wins, that's there because if those factors exist, then vacation of wins is the definite penalty. But that doesn't preclude the committee from imposing that penalty in other aspects. And Arkansas Tech University tried to argue that they shouldn't be punished under the penalty matrix because if they would have learned about it, they would have stopped it. They would have put the student athletes, ineligible student athletes, to reinstatement. And the committee noted that the violations were unintentional, but the committee can't engage in speculation as to what may have happened if the university would have found out about the violations. So the committee has to punish the university for the violations committed, not what could have happened or could have been prevented. I mentioned earlier about head coach control and rebutting the presumption. We saw in the first case the head coach didn't rebut the presumption. In this case, the head men's basketball coach at Syracuse University. This is an appeal of the Committee on Infractions in Syracuse, where the Committee on Infractions indicated that the head coach failed his responsibility under Bylaw 11-111. And the Infraction Appeals Committee articulated what factors they were going to use to determine whether or not the presumption has been rebutted. And this is the first time that a committee, whether it be the COI or the Appeals Committee, has really articulated in great detail all the factors that they're going to look at whether or not the presumption has been rebutted by a head coach. And the factors include whether or not compliance is a shared responsibility within the program, whether or not the head coach has ultimate responsibility for the program integrity, if there are written policies, procedures regarding potential elite athlete issues, whether or not the head coach has a hands-on approach to spot checking, and whether or not there's any avoidance of potential conflicts between staff duties toward program success and compliance. And that touches upon the earlier case we talked about. We had that conflict between the head coach and the compliance staff. And so the Appeals Committee is going to be looking at all these factors, see whether or not the head coach has rebutted his or her presumption. I'm sorry, whether or not he or her, in terms of the head coach, has rebutted the presumption that a head coach control violation actually occurred. Again, these are some other factors that the Appeals Committee looks at, including the fact that there was timely, consistent, and continuing education, and there is clear understanding for regular compliance staff consultation. And again, that's from the Syracuse Appeals case. There were several situations in which the Committee on Infractions rejected the enforcement staff's allegations, and they include this in a violations not demonstrated section. And in the Oklahoma State University case, this is a situation where the school didn't follow or wasn't entirely consistent with their drug policy violations. And they looked at the fact that, and the enforcement staff alleged a failure to monitor. And the Committee on Infractions said no. The school had compliance system in place. The AD was designated the drug policy administrator and monitor. The AD, the football coach, communicated regularly regarding student athlete discipline. And so although the policy wasn't necessarily followed in all aspects, it wasn't an intentional violation of policy. It was a misunderstanding or misapplication of the policy. So the COI decided not to fine for the failure to monitor that alleged by the enforcement staff. And also in the Oklahoma State University case, again, they had a hostess program. And the hostess program violated NCAA legislation. Again, similarly to the drug testing or substance abuse program, the school was able to demonstrate that they had the compliance system in place, monitoring, education, and all that was put in place, and that the violations were unintentional. And again, they rejected the enforcement staff's failure to monitor allegation. In the University of Hawaii case, there was no violation found. Again, the enforcement staff tried to allege that there were impermissible on-court coaching and scouting activities, and the panel could not conclude that a violation occurred because a record included recorded testimony from student athletes, former coaches, media members who attended some of these practices or workouts, and a team manager. And all that testimony was inconsistent with the enforcement staff's allegation. So the committee said, no, we're not going to fine for this violation. And then there were several cases in which the committee or hearing panels considered, aggravating cases, mitigation cases, and standard cases. And that's a new feature for Division I, Bylaw 19. And in the University of North Carolina Greensboro case, they look at aggravating factors, and they basically held that aggravating factors occurs when a case involves 3 Level 2 violations. Mitigation in Oklahoma State University case occurs when the number of mitigating factors outweigh the number of aggravating factors. So if you have 5 mitigating factors and 3 aggravating factors, the committee hearing panel is going to look at that as a mitigation case. When it's a standard case, when the number of aggravating and mitigating factors are equal or the same, or there's no aggravating and no mitigating factors. And that happened in the Southeastern Louisiana University case. Departures from penalties precedent. This is where Syracuse was trying to argue that there should be a departure from case precedent regarding penalties in similar cases. And the Infraction Appeals Committee indicated that they're going to be looking at how the committee weighed precedent. And where they're unable to determine how the Committee on Infractions weigh case precedent in regards to, for example, a reduction in scholarship penalties, they're going to say or believe that the committee departed from precedent. In particular, they're going to look at if they can determine that there was no qualitative distinction in the record, then that would probably indicate that the Committee on Infractions departed from prior precedent. So, and again, that was in the Syracuse University case. And finally, the weight of prior infractions decisions. Again, this is from the head men's basketball coach appeal in the Syracuse case. And the committee looked at the use by the party, by the head men's basketball coach, of various past decisions of the committees on infractions. And to indicate that, hey, the Committee on Infractions departed from their prior precedent because of all these other decisions. And the Appeals Committee has said in the past that each case stands on its own, and you can't really look at just bottom line numbers. You have to really look underneath the hood and see exactly what went on in each case. So you can't really use case A to say that in case B, the committee should rule a certain way. And so this is a quote from that committee, basically, again, reiterating that there can be guidance by prior decisions, but it's going to be the judgment of the Committee on Infractions to apply that precedent on a case-by-case basis. Before we proceed to our last question and answer session, I want to remind you that Buckner conducts at least one complimentary webinar each month for you and your staff. For our attorney participants, most of the monthly programs have received continuing legal education credits from at least one state bar association. The list of currently scheduled programs is listed on the slides. And for a complete list of programs or to register for a webinar, please visit the webinars page on the Buckner website, which is located at bucknersportslaw.com. And we're going to put onto our website additional programs that will be occurring in the next couple months. And that should be on our website in early April. You can view the video of this webinar and other Buckner online workshops on our website, bucknersportslaw.com, or on our YouTube platform. Finally, for a reasonable fee, you can request a Buckner professional to conduct a program on the topic of your choice on your campus through the firm's Campus Speaker Series. For more information on this service, please contact us at country code 1-954-941-1844. We will now start our final question and answer session. And I'm looking at the queue, and we don't have any questions. But if you have any questions for me after the program, please don't hesitate to email them to me at mbuckner@bucknersportslaw.com. Thank you so much. We are out of time. And I look forward to working with you and engaging with you in future webinars and other programs that we offer. I appreciate it again. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Take care.